I don't need to know more than I need to know. You know what I mean? And wait for that T-shirt to drop too.
Yeah, or wait until you're in the woods and you're confronted with it. You're like, oh, turns out I needed to know more.
I should have paid attention.
Should have listened to that episode where they talk about how to kill it, because we're going to talk about that.
Okay, sweet.
Welcome.
Oh, here we go.
Welcome to the Low Grade Research Podcast.
I thought maybe I would start off this episode with a little bit of a deeper question.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So, last week you did Chupacabra.
That's right.
Great episode. It was not at all what I thought it was from pop culture.
Yeah, we're looking to dispel a lot of the myths around these creatures that are myths.
Well, and we'll find out tonight that some of them are more scary than we thought they were.
Oh, yikes.
So, because tonight we're doing Windegos.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So I wanted
Just saying that like makes me shiver.
I know exactly what you mean.
Also, you mentioned to me that this is just before we started recording, that this would be the topic that we were going to talk about. And so I was like pulling up some different pages and getting on to the Wikipedia page.
Right.
I started typing Winnebago. And I was like, not motorhomes.
Well,
there's no relation.
Wendigos eat people and Winnebagos eat retired people in a way. So they're generally not far.
If you've ever seen a Windego in a Winnebago, please write us in and tell us that story.
Seriously.
We will have you on our show.
If it's in the parking lot of a Waffle House, I'll give you $1 million.
We will fly you out and have you on our show.
Yeah. You can even be a third permanent host for all I care.
Gosh, no kidding.
Let's see.
But we're talking about Windego.
We are. And before we really get into it, I do want to give kind of maybe a trigger warning, a content warning. So, these episodes we do are clean episodes, and we try and make sure they're that way so we can reach a wide variety of people. But this episode in particular is a little bit dark, so there are going to be descriptions of murder, cannibalism, suicide, and other kind of frightening scenarios. So please listen with care. And honestly, if you keep listening after this point and you get upset about it, then it's your fault.
Yeah, that's on you. But if you're going to keep listening, please enjoy it with us.
Please do. One more other call out before we really get started. So this Wendigos have they're a part of Native American folklore. That's what I was trying to say. And so with that, I've gone through kind of some effort to make sure that I've got pronunciations right and things, trying to nail those down. But that being said, even from what I gather researching this, it can be a sensitive topic for Native people. So, take that for what it's worth. And we're trying our best. We're going to be, respectful of your culture and respectful of the content that we're talking about, as much as we can. But if we get something wrong, shoot us an email. Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
See how we can get better.
We don't mean to offend, but we do mean to inform.
You ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. I want to kind of start off with something a little different. And I've been thinking about it all day, and I sent you a text to see if you could start thinking about it, to get into a little bit of a spooky mood.
Oof. Okay.
Will you tell me about the time you were most afraid in nature?
So I was trying to think about that, and I've had some, I feel like I've had some intense moments. Thankfully, and knock on wood, I haven't had any, life-changing moments while out in the woods. I do remember the time that kind of came to my mind first was with you, actually.
Oh boy.
You and I were hiking. We just spent a weekend in Zion's National Park.
Yeah.
And we kind of found this really small canyon that's not like it's not a big hiking canyon. It's not popular. And it's honestly
it's
there's
not even marked or
there's
anything.
barely a trail going up through it. And once you get to a certain point, there really aren't any trails. And it's just this narrow canyon. And we hiked up. It was later in the day. We'd kind of already done some hiking and some exploring, and we just decided to hit this small canyon to see what was at the end of it.
Yeah.
And so we were hiking for, I don't know, an hour or so, a little more than that. And it gets narrower and narrower, and it's full of trees and brush, and the red rock, it's stunning. But we kind of got to a spot where, and I don't know if you remember this, but we both kind of just looked at each other.
Yeah.
And we both kind of had this conversation with our eyes of I don't think we're the only things here.
Yeah.
Right now.
Right.
And I mean, I felt like we kind of heard some leaves move, some brush rustling, you know. We didn't actually see anything. I think one, if not both of us, had firearms with us.
Yeah.
Which we quickly pulled out.
Yeah.
And so
we're ready to go, dude.
Yeah.
But those don't work good against ghosts.
No, they don't. But we just both kind of looked at each other and just shook our heads like, yeah, we think it's a good time to turn around.
Yeah.
And we just turned around and walked out. So, I mean, thankfully, we didn't have to find out what was also there.
Yeah.
But that was the time that I recall where I just felt like it wasn't just us.
That was a pretty spooky day, honestly. And when I was thinking about that was one of the ones that came to mind too. Because, gosh, dude, and I know like memories make fools of us all. And
totally.
When I remember that, I almost feel like, I mean, those were tall cliffs on either side. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
So
I mean,
felt like it even got darker and darker kind of as we went deeper into there.
And it wasn't late, but it would have been like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
That sounds
but
right.
yeah, as you get in these tall canyons, that's blocking either horizon, and there's no sunlight getting in. So even though it's not late, it's dusky.
Yeah, it feels like the sun's setting way sooner.
Totally.
And if memory serves, we had seen like remnants of a game kill, right? Like something had taken down a deer.
Right. Yeah.
And we had talked a little bit about after maybe it had been a mountain lion that spooked us or something like that. But
sure.
I don't know.
I mean, it's a possibility.
Yeah, dude. The experience that comes to mind for me is not dissimilar. But so, you know, you and I both grew up in Utah. We're proud Utah boys.
That's right.
And so we're not proud boys. Let's make a distinction there. We're just proud Utah boys.
I've never been to Washington. I want.
No, yeah. I'm not even interested in going to see the Capitol. Like just as a general tourist trip. Anyway, but there's Utah has crazy landscape differences.
It's incredible.
If you drive from the north end of the state to the south end of the state, you'll see what appear to be like different states altogether.
Yeah.
And so there is a tiny, tiny, tiny little town called Farron, Utah, that my mom grew up in. And so we spent tons of time out there. And I was going to say no disrespect for the people who live there, but I feel like the people who live there also don't really particularly like it. But it's like tiny.
I think they know where they live.
I think, yeah, there's something that comes with that. But it's, it's like out in the desert. It's like everything's kind of run down.
Well, it was an old mining town, wasn't it?
Old mine. Yeah, everything out there is, yeah. It's kind of like south central Utah, I guess. Southeast central Utah, maybe.
It's 20 people away from becoming a ghost town.
It is, yeah, seriously.
Like 20 more people leave.
Yeah, and I honestly, in our lifetime, I'm sure we'll see it be completely abandoned. So anyway, spent a ton of time down there. But growing up, there's like, we'd call it going out on the desert when I was a kid. But there's like all these huge boulders and stuff if you drive out far enough out into like, public BLM land.
Right.
So we spent a ton of time out there, and I took my dog once to go camp out there just by myself. So it's just me and my dog. And I got out there, I got everything set up. I got a fire going. I was right up against this plateau. It was beautiful. And like, there's big boulders it's all dirt roads, but like I was kind of back a ways off the main dirt road. And then, so it was kind of private even. It was nice. And it really was super pretty. And then kind of got into dusk. And I couldn't shake this feeling that I just was being watched. And man, I'd like talk myself through every single excuse in the book, especially given that I'd already set everything up and spent like 45 minutes getting everything ready. So it was like, this is like, it's not a big deal, whatever. It's, I'm just getting in my head. But then like there's this, it was coming from the direction of the plateau, which my back was to. And so, but every time I turned. That's
where it would be.
Well, yeah, dude. And I'll tie this into what we're going to talk about in a second, because I just couldn't shake it. I just really, and it got so into my head, you know what I mean? Like there's something back there watching me. Mm-hmm. So I packed everything up faster than I've ever packed anything in my whole life. I like had an open gas can. Like I just threw a bungee cord on top of my roof rack just to keep it there from falling off. So I'm like spewing gas fumes the entire way back. But I drove like I guess it probably would be like a 45-minute drive, maybe closer to an hour back into town. Mm-hmm. And then there's one church in that town. And so I figured it was hollowed ground. So, because it was like another 2.5 hours or whatever home. So I didn't want to drive that. So I drove into the church parking lot and then figured I'd be the safest there to sleep there. Yeah. And it was fine. But so that area in particular, there are some little canyons that wind up back not far from where I'd camped.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of Native American pictographs and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, growing up, we'd spend a lot of time down there, and there's tons of pictographs everywhere. And we'd hear stories from my grandpa of like I don't know, there's kind of like at least in Utah, maybe, I would imagine it's other places, but there's almost like a spiritual shamanistic fascination with Native American folklore and
Totally.
stuff, right?
I agree.
And I guess there's a sense that they are more connected to the natural world than we are, especially the natural world here, because this is where they're from.
Absolutely.
And so I think it kind of adds to like a mystical kind of feeling around all of that stuff. And so when that happened to me that night, like, I mean, I thought maybe it could have been a mountain lion that night too, actually. But then it was like, there's all those Native American drawings back up in there.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's just an area you shouldn't be alone in or
Sure.
whatever, for whatever reason. But it just like leaning super hard into that like mysticism, right? So when we talk about stuff like this, we talk about the Windego, like we talked on a previous episode if we believed in ghosts and believed in stuff like this.
Sure.
And I think you and I, we were a little different in our response, but I think we're generally the same in that like we don't believe in some of it, but some of it we have a healthy respect for.
Totally.
Right?
Yes, I think that's where I stand on ghosts. Like, I don't know if I believe in like, spooky ghosts, but like stuff like this, I definitely have a respect for, because I think it's in my best interest to acknowledge it rather than ignore it.
Yeah, and I mean,
We're going to put that on a T-shirt, so watch out for that to drop.
Acknowledge it, don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Gosh, what should the picture be?
This creature right here, Bigfoot. Oh, write that down.
Yeah, that's a T-shirt idea. That's going in the vault.
I'm just going to text these to you so we don't forget.
You don't have to do that. I'll listen to them all when I edit.
Oh, well, there's another one I wanted to... What was the one I said at the beginning? That'd make a great T-shirt. We don't mean to insult. We just mean to inform.
Yeah.
What was it? Something like
Something like that.
That's going on.
I'll catch it in the recording. Yeah.
That's going on a coffee mug.
I'll text it to you. Ooh, that's a good coffee mug idea.
Right?
Dang.
Don't steal our ideas.
TM.
All 28 of you that are listening.
Restricted.
All right. I don't mean to sidetrack, but yes, I do.
Our whole episode
Respect
is
it.
sidetrack, bro. Yeah, so what do you know about the Windego?
I know they're mostly related to Native American folklore. I often get them mixed up with another popular one, especially for the area that we live, is skinwalkers. So I know I mix them up. I know they're not the same thing, but like I go back and forth and I almost like interchange them sometimes, which I know isn't correct. No. But I don't. It's also something I haven't looked deeply enough in, because I'm playing ignorant a little bit, where it's like, I don't need to know more than I need to know. You know what I mean? And wait for that T-shirt to drop too.
Yeah, or wait until you're in the woods and you're confronted with it. You're like, oh, turns out I needed to know more.
I should have paid attention.
Should have listened to that episode where they talk about how to kill it, because we're going to talk about that.
Okay, sweet.
But I mean, I think you're right. Like, I think part of the reason we don't know so much about Wendigos in Utah is that Utah is not, according to the folklore, is not a geographic area that Wendigos.
Oh, interesting. Well, and that probably has to do with, like, because it's not just me, but a lot of people I've talked to interchange them with Skinwalker,
right?
And we in Utah we have Skinwalker Ranch, so arguably one of the more popular places for sightings,
for sure.
Which I've got some friends with stories that grew up in that area.
So we should probably have an episode about Skinwalkers.
That would be cool. That'd be cool.
But from what I could see, I mean, I kind of thought the same thing. I kind of interchanged them a little bit. So I looked up the difference. And so skinwalkers are, and this may not be correct depending on where you find it, I suppose. But from what I found, they're kind of like the opposite of shamans in Native American folklore. So a shaman is there to do good and to be a healer and to, like, medicine men, and, to help the tribe and help the community and help, what I mean? They're doing healing, spiritual healing, physical healing, emotional, whatever. And skinwalkers are they're like witches that are on the opposite end of that spectrum.
Okay.
And they can in it, like possess animals and stuff, and they're malicious. And so
Okay.
I didn't do more research on that. So like I said, we should do an episode, but
yeah,
they are for sure different than Wendigos. So, man, let's dive into it. Because this was one of those topics that, as I really dug in, it got more and more interesting. And on this one, I actually jumped into a couple of other resources outside of Wikipedia.
we have to do that sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes
that's okay.
there's just not enough.
And arguably, some would prefer we use multiple sources, which we have been pretty staunchly against. So I want to acknowledge I'm using the Wikipedia page. I'm also using allthingsinteresting.com. They have a really awesome article about what is the Windego. So we will link that in the show notes too, so you can go check that out. So what is a Windego? In short, it's a mythological creature originating from Algonquian folklore. So Algonquian is kind of a region. It's also a people, but broadly speaking, it's like the greater Great Lakes area. Kind of.
Sure.
So like southeastern Canada and northeastern United States.
Okay, sure.
And so it includes people from the Ojibwe, Cree, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Naskapi, Innu, and Algonquin peoples.
Okay, cool.
So this is kind of like it's folklore that kind of encompasses all of those. So, I think, man, I'm going to get this wrong, but all of those different peoples, I think, or for the most part, they speak Algonquian.
Okay.
So I think that's why they're mostly connected there, but, take that with a grain of salt.
It's Wikipedia.
A Wendigo is a malevolent spirit with human-like characteristics, and it can possess human beings, okay? It causes its victims to feel insatiable hunger and a desire to eat other humans.
Oh.
Right?
Wait, it's so you say that again. It can take humans' form, or it can possess humans?
Kind of, yes.
Okay. Even worse.
So there's a little bit of variation, right? So there's some variation that seems to indicate that when Wendigos are just like creatures that exist like independently of human beings, and then, sorry, a tiny little fly just landed right on my glasses and scared the heck out of me. That they just kind of exist like on their own,
Okay.
like a dog would or a bear or whatever.
Sure, like its own species.
Right. And then there's a lot of it, which seems like the majority of it is that they're humans that get turned into Wendigos.
Okay, sure.
I keep wanting to say Windego, which every time I say that make me think of like a southern drawl. Getting up in the woods and checking out these Windegos. I just listened to Flip Dude, Walton Goggins.
Oh, yeah.
He was on Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And at one point he talks about how he got bitten by a spider. And he says that, yeah, I got bit 5 times by a brown recluse.
When people say recluse, I love-hate it. Because it's like, I love a good southern drawl, but it's like, it's just recluse.
It's like, dude, that's so much a part of you to say that word that way.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah, I got bit by a brown recluse.
Such cultural thing.
Anyway, so it's kind of like 2 different versions of Wendigos, right? So we're going to go with the one that seemed to be the more popular version. So it's generally depicted as a giant, like 15-foot tall.
Oh, wow.
Humanoid, right? And in this episode, I try not to do this, but there's a few places where I'm going to give quotes from the article. In fact, I think I've got 2 or 3, but one of them is a depiction from a Ojibwe scholar talking about what these things look like, which we'll talk about in just a second.
Cool.
So it's a 15-foot tall, like humanoid. It has some cases they say it has a heart made of ice, and so it kind of signals its approach with either a really foul stench, like decaying bodies, or an unseasonable chill.
Cool.
So it's almost always across the board associated with winter, the north, coldness, famine, or starvation. Right. There's also a really interesting modern debate taking place about a psychiatric diagnosis called Windego psychosis.
Tell me more.
Essentially, in a nutshell, it's that it's a culture-bound syndrome. Culture-bound means that it is a syndrome. I mean, kind of what it sounds like. It's bound
Confined to
one
a
culture or
Sure.
one people, right? So it's a culture-bound syndrome, and it's signaled by an intense craving for human flesh and a fear of becoming a cannibal. But that is even kind of like, we'll talk about Wendigo psychosis, because it has kind of evolved into something, from something into something. And like there's an old-timey definition that was like you know the lore about a werewolf. Like if you get bit by a werewolf, you're still human for a minute, but you'll turn,
but then
right?
you can turn.
And so in kind of the older version of Wendigo psychosis, it's kind of used to describe someone who is becoming a Wendigo, and like they're starting to develop characteristics of the Wendigo.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like a legitimate modern psychiatric observation of Wendigo psychosis, which is kind of adopted to this culture-bound, like cannibalistic, intensity and fervor. So
very interesting.
Yeah, we'll dive into it. You want to talk about the origins?
Yes.
So the actual word Wendigo comes from Ojibwe people, and it is, I mean, it's probably pronounced the exact same. I'll show you what the word looks like, and we can post it. But
yeah, pull that up.
Wendigo is what it says, but it's, Wendigo is spelled Wendigo,
Mm-hmm.
but this origin word is Windegoo.
Sure.
So it's kind of like pulling some of those vowel sounds out a little bit.
Just making it a little longer.
Yeah. So interestingly, I wanted to talk a little more about this, and maybe we will if we have time at the end, but there is a kind of a parallel mythical figure. So the Wendigo is on, for lack of a better region, is the north, what did we call it the other day? The ANE of the United States, the Atlantic Northeast of the United States.
Okay.
You know how they say Pacific Northwest?
Sure.
I was talking to a friend. I was like, why don't we call it the Atlantic Northeast instead of New England,
Sure.
That's so stupid. But yeah, anyway, so there's kind of like a parallel creature called the Washugi
To the Pacific Northwest?
in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay.
But
cool.
it's not quite a Wendigo. It does crave human flesh and has similar characteristics, but it's a little bit different.
Sure.
But
So it's just a crackhead from Portland.
it could be, honestly. Just someone on bath salts.
A Washugi.
Isn't everybody in Portland on bath salts?
There's a Washugi in a Starbucks. We gotta get out of here.
Get an order from it first.
It's the barista.
Yeah. They're not writing a screenplay. They're handing out coffees.
They're looking for victims.
Looking
All
for
right.
those. Where am I? Okay, so Basil H. Johnston is that Ojibwe scholar, right? And so
okay, cool.
in some of his works, he describes a Wendigo. So I'm going to read this quote. So sorry in advance for reading.
Hey, we gotta read to learn.
The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation. Its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin. Its complexion, the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed deep back into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton, disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody, unclean and suffering from separation of the flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption.
Ooh.
So that's about as scary as a thing you can come up
Yeah.
with. Because the other point to make is that you're not running into a Wendigo in like a busy shopping mall in the middle of town.
Oh.
You're running into a Wendigo when you're cold and you're starving or you're just like out in the woods,
Right.
alone, or even with people. But it's like out in the woods, right?
Right.
And even, I mean, we might talk about this more later. I didn't really put in a place to just talk about this, but in part of the research for this, I tried to find like authentic Wendigo encounter stories.
Yeah.
So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and these YouTube videos are like people who just find Reddit threads and then read the Reddit threads on YouTube.
Oh,
So
sure.
that's not even their story.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was unbearable. And they don't read it well. And so it's just like watching one dude struggle through reading a story from Reddit when you can just go find the thread yourself.
Right.
But some of them were pretty spooky, but I don't know that like, I'm not sure any of the ones that I found at least were from like Native American
actual
descent,
source.
which I feel like might be a little more authentic, but
I think there's probably also a reason you didn't find any from a Native American source.
Probably because it's probably not something that they're just out chatting about on the internet.
I don't think they talk about it a lot.
No. So like I said, they're often depicted as giants, and the legend goes that whenever they eat somebody, that they grow in proportion to the size of the meal that they just had.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So the idea is that they're always hungry, they're never full, and they're always very gluttonous and always starving.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter. They have this insatiable hunger for human flesh, but as soon as they eat somebody, like they're satiated while they're eating them, and then they grow in size compared to that meal, and then they're more hungry than they were before.
Oof.
So
it's a bad dinner guest.
It gets worse because they also don't lose human cognition or speech. So in the All Things Interesting article, it talks about how in some depictions, Wendigos are seen as being like superhuman speed and strength. And so like they could just run you down in the woods and it wouldn't be a problem for them.
Right.
And in some depictions, they don't do that at all. But the reason is because they can mimic human speech.
Oh,
and
sure.
So even in some of the stories that I listen to, they would talk about this. So like it'll be a family out camping and one will go, wander off to water a tree or whatever. And then they can hear somebody talking to them in the woods and like calling for them. Right.
Ugh.
And so the idea is that that's a Wendigo. And so they're baiting you by using human speech or help me or come over here or whatever. And then you do, and then you're too close to get away.
Look, I love camping. This stuff
not anymore.
This stuff makes me want to stay at home always.
I read this, dude. I'm like, I'm not camping for a year. I'm not camping until I know all the Wendigos are dead. The bummer part is that I love Maine, and I spend a lot of time in Maine, and that's like Wendigo territory. So
it's a hot spot.
Yeah, I'm never going up
or
there again,
spot.
ever again. I'm never going to leave my house. Getting a fully remote job. They can't get me at work.
It's one of their things. It's one of their rules. Even cryptids have guidelines.
They do. They even have
Can't get you at work.
Yep. All right, where am I? Okay, so they can just mimic human voices, right? And so it gets a little bit crazier because some of the I'm going to read another paragraph, so bear with me, but they can even survive like dismemberment and auto-cannibalism.
It gets worse.
So Lottie Chickawa Marsden, who is an ethnographer for Chippewas of Rama First Nation, she wrote this. And this seems to me, they didn't go into crazy detail on the Wikipedia page. I think that this is part of her like I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, creating a chronology of events of her people, I guess. But
okay.
This is a story from that group. So one time long ago, a big Wendigo stole an Indian boy, but the boy was too thin, so the Wendigo didn't eat him up right away. But he traveled with the Indian boy, waiting for him till he'd get fat. The Wendigo had a knife, and he'd cut the boy on the hand to see if he was fat enough to eat. But the boy didn't get fat. They traveled too much. One day, they came to an Indian village, and the Wendigo set the boy to the Indian village to get some things for him to eat. He just gave the boy so much time to go there and back. The boy told the Indians that the Wendigo was near them, and showed them his hand and where the Wendigo cut him to see if he was fat enough to eat. They heard the Wendigo calling the boy. He said to the boy, "Hurry up, don't tell lies to those Indians." All of the Indians went to where the Wendigo was and cut off his legs. They went back again to see if he was dead. He wasn't dead. He was eating the marrow from inside of the bones of his legs that were cut off. The Indians asked the Wendigo if there was any fat on them. He said, "You bet there is. I've eaten lots of Indians. No wonder they are fat." The Indians killed him and cut him into pieces, and that was the end of the giant Wendigo.
Ugh.
Little spooky.
Spooky.
Little spooky time.
Spooky.
You want to talk really quick about how to kill a Wendigo, and then we can take a quick break?
Oh, yes, I do. Because I've learned all this stuff that scares me.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know how to defend myself.
So the key is heat or fire, right?
Okay.
So it's said to counteract the coldness in their heart. But if you can introduce heat and fire, that's like people will, in their stories, they'll say that they were safe around their campfire kind of thing. Because it's not going to go around the heat or the fire. So if you can light their whole thing on fire, more power to you.
Yes.
Burn the whole thing to a crisp,
Yes.
You're calling it a day.
I'm going to burn the whole national park to the ground.
If you can. You were going to do that anyway.
Ooh. Watch out, Badlands.
Yeah. Oh, no. Not the Badlands. They're beautiful.
That's where they live.
It's the only thing worth redeeming South Dakota at all. That and the Corn Palace, if you ever get a chance to go.
What?
Have I not told you about the Corn Palace?
Maybe.
It's just basically it's a building covered with corn attached to their city hall. I don't even remember what town it was in, but it's advertised for miles and miles.
Google that.
It is kind of cool. Maybe I'll show you. They have like cool artistry in there.
What in the world?
Yeah, isn't that random?
That's wild. That's the most random thing.
In Mitchell, South Dakota, I think.
Get out.
Yeah, they'll have like different images on there.
Corn
But the
art.
thing you don't, so this picture I'm showing you right now, you have the Corn Palace, and if you Google that, it will show this Corn Palace. But there's like a random like tan building on the side of it. That's literally like the City Hall building. So it's so random.
It's so corny.
Yeah, it is corny.
All right, back to killing Wendigos.
Killing Wendigos. So if you can light the whole thing on fire, that's the way to go.
Okay.
If you can't do that, dismembering it is a good step in the right direction.
That'll at least slow it down.
But essentially, the key is that you have to kill its heart, basically. So they'll say even if you dismember it, you got to cut its heart out and then destroy the heart.
Well, how do you destroy the heart? Like, is there a one
like
way
any
or
way
it's
you
just,
want,
okay,
I guess.
Okay.
It's kind of like zombie rules,
I'm
except
asking
not the brain,
specific
it's the
questions
heart.
here.
Well, that's what you got to do.
I'm tired of being ignorant.
The thing is, if you're in the woods alone and you encounter a 15-foot tall beast that wants to eat your flesh,
That's fair.
I mean,
I don't have to be brave for anyone if I'm alone.
yeah, you don't.
I'm a coward.
You don't have to be brave. You can die in peace
Oh,
after being ripped apart.
gosh. Okay. Dismemberment. Cut its heart out. Destroy it.
Death by fire is the best way to go.
Just like my stepdad. Just kidding.
Coming after you, Ronnie. Leave my mom alone.
All right.
We'll be
I don't
right
have
back after a word
After
from these sponsors. Alrighty. You want to keep talking about Wendigos?
Yes, I do.
Because
We just learned how to kill them.
we did.
I took notes.
I'm sure you did.
I hope you did too.
Because surprise for you, you and I are going on a road trip tonight.
Don't say that
Yeah.
tonight.
To the woods.
I gotta go home to my wife.
No, you're not. We're going to the woods.
All right.
We're
keep
going to
going.
reenact our Bloodhound episode, Master of the Buckhounds, rather.
I was like Bloodhound episode.
And then we're going to search for
We're just
Wendigo.
gonna chase Wendigos on horseback.
Tell you what I don't think is a good idea. Searching out something that can kill you.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's a hard pass for me, buddy. All right. Well, I want to talk a little more about Wendigo psychosis. That sound
Okay.
good?
Yes, we mentioned this briefly, but we're going to go in a little more depth now.
Yeah, so earlier I had kind of said that Wendigo psychosis was seen in kind of two ways. So there's like a kind of a modern psychological diagnosis, Wendigo psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
There's also kind of the idea that like it's the period of time where someone's turning into a Wendigo.
Oh, okay,
Where they're
sure.
being turned,
It's like their
so to speak.
transition.
Yeah. So it's a good point to say this. So there's people who certainly believe that Wendigos are as real and tangible as a bear in the woods,
Totally, sure.
right? And then there's a lot of people, even, you know, this dichotomy exists even in Native American cultures. There's some people that just view it as it's kind of like it's a myth and a folklore as a cautionary tale.
Oh, okay, sure.
Right? Because across the board with Wendigos, there's the idea that it's cannibalism and it's eating human flesh, and that's part of it. Or it's like that you're so far down the rabbit hole on greed or some other vice or whatever that like it can consume you and then change who you are.
I see.
Right? So it's kind of like they encourage that myth, so to speak, so they can like encourage
Like
the
the
idea
greater,
of moderation.
the greater purpose of teaching a lesson or a principle or moral is what's more important.
Right. Yeah. Which in
Okay,
this case
cool.
is moderation, right?
Gosh, I feel a lot better now.
But they're also very real.
Oh, I feel bad.
And you should know how to kill them. Because they're coming for you. in terms of like an actual real tangible Wendigo, there's the idea that either they were created when somebody resorted to cannibalism as a means to survive, and then they became a Wendigo because of that.
Okay.
Or if you spent too much time around one, I don't know in what scenario this would ever be the case, but if you spent too much time around one, you become one.
Sure.
Right?
That one seems a little more on the metaphorical side.
I would think so.
You spend more time around someone who's gluttonous.
Yeah.
And you start to become the same.
I agree. Yeah.
Solved. Thanks, everybody. It's about to get spookier.
Tell your mom and dad. Yeah, it is about to get
spookier, and I'm afraid. Okay.
I can't remember what I was just going to say. Dang it, Mitchell.
I do that a lot. We were talking about how they spent too much time with one. And then they became one.
Just 2 sneezes. Usually goes 7 or 8, so that was a lucky record. I was going to say that, like, if you're spending too much... The idea that it's a metaphorical thing, that if you're spending too much time around somebody who has this crazy vice, that it can rub off on you, is a great metaphor until you think about, like, cannibalism. Because if you're spending literally any amount of time around someone who's engaging in cannibalism, here's an idea. Don't.
Yeah, you're in the wrong crowd.
Yeah, 100% the wrong crowd. You're in the wrong neighborhood. You're in the wrong state. You're in the wrong country.
Get out.
Yeah. Get out of Venezuela today. Dang, I should have said North Korea. Except I think that's more real there, so
chance.
That's sad.
All right.
All right, so Wendigo psychosis. So we have kind of the essential modern explanation that it's people becoming possessed by the Wendigo spirit. When they're in need of food, they have no other choice but to engage in cannibalism. And we get kind of a weird, like, first-hand account of this in the article. There is an old collection of chronicles of Jesuit missions in what was known at the time as New France.
Okay.
So New France would have been, it was like 1661. And New France would have been essentially like if you were to cut the United States in half and take it from Texas all the way up through like South Dakota, Minnesota, and then up through New England.
Okay.
And Nova Scotia beyond into Canada. That was like New France.
Oh, was it basically like what we bought with the Louisiana Purchase? Because France owned that. We purchased that from France.
We did, but it was kind of I'm not sure what the timing is on that because I feel like...
I mean, it wouldn't have been the same time, but I'm saying was it like the same area, essentially?
Well, I don't know even because the pictures make it look like it's... like here, I'll just look it up for you so you can see a picture. Because in 1661, at least... It was essentially the entire eastern half of the United States. And so with the Louisiana Purchase, I think we bought more...
It was more Midwest.
Yeah. So I think that the powers that be kind of shifted because I thought that it was like essentially everything west of the Mississippi was purchased with the Louisiana Purchase.
It was like west of the Mississippi and then like through Colorado, Wyoming, Montana.
Sure.
Okay.
So even this
Glad
is a little
we cleared
bit,
that up.
This
so
is
yeah,
a little.
This
map is a little bit too late. Even that's 1745.
Mm.
So anyway, so 1661. It's essentially like kind of part of Texas up through the Great Lakes, up into Canada, through parts of New England, kind of.
Okay.
And that's a big generalization. If you're going to write in and tell us that I got that wrong, then we know already. But essentially they had like Jesuit missions that were going out to try and convert people in these areas, right?
Oh, okay.
And so this is, they would take accounts of what their missions entailed and then publish those for people to read. And so this is a quote directly out of one of those, right?
Oh, cool.
So this is kind of a retroactive diagnosis of Windego psychosis.
Okay.
Based on this text. All right. So they wrote, what caused us greater concern was the news that met us upon entering the lake, namely that the men deputed by our conductor for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous where they were to await our coming, had met their death with the previous winter in a very strange manner. Those poor men, according to the report given us, were seized with an ailment unknown to us, but not very unusual among the people that we were seeking. They were affected with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men like veritable werewolves, and devour them voraciously, without being able to appease the glut or their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and, as death is the only sole remedy among those simple people for checking such acts of murder, they were slain in order to stay the curse of their madness.
Cool. So they all kind of fell victim to this disease.
Yeah, so essentially that passage is talking about how they went to go meet up. These Jesuit priests were going to go meet up with some native people. It says the lake. I'm sure that in the reference for the actual text, we could find out which lake. But
sure.
I take that to mean one of the Great Lakes. But they go up into that area, and then they meet up with the people who they had kind of made an arrangement with, who were going to be the middlemen, so to speak, to get them hooked up with those other people. Mm-hmm. And they found all these things happening, right? Which is horrifying.
Crazy.
And,
haunting.
Maybe you get the sense that, like, they're writing, there's a lot of, when you're talking about religious exploits, there's a lot of writing and sense and historical record keeping that points to the religious aspect of it, civilizing basically the unreligious aspect.
Okay.
So like we're the priests and we're going to go and civilize these savages that are, you know what I mean? There's kind of like that sentiment everywhere. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of this is beefed up a little bit to make it seem a little bit more shocking than it was. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about cannibalism, you're talking about cannibalism. So, it starts shocking and it ends shocking.
There's not much more to beef up.
Yikes. Gross, dude.
Unintentional. Anyway.
Not much more to ground beef up.
Unintentional and unfortunate. Keep an eye open for that t-shirt to drop.
Speaking of beef, check out Springville Meats.
Oh my gosh, we haven't given a plug for our sponsor for Springville Meats in a long time.
Forever.
So go check them out.
Yeah, check them out. That's it. That's the whole ad. We're going to pivot from cannibalism right into giving a message to our sponsor. Right, that's not even a sponsor.
We're on a good roll here.
Are we?
Yes.
Oh. What?
So unfortunate.
What is? The way we handled that just now, or the story that we're talking about?
The way I trip into things like that.
I think you're doing a great job, buddy.
Thanks, pal.
All right, so like I said, when we kind of alluded to in that block quote, so they said that, where do they see? Death is the sole remedy amongst these people for checking for murder. They were slain in order to stay the course of their madness.
Oof, it's so rough,
Which was kind of like the idea with this, right? So in many cases, Wendigo psychosis, the individual was killed to prevent further cannibalism.
Yeah. Right?
Because they were really seen as like having been possessed by this, and they're going to continue killing, so we have to kill them to stop this.
Right.
There are some places that say that if they took on a course of like eating really fatty meats or drinking animal grease, it would start to cure them of their psychosis.
Oh, like it would kind of like suppress their cannibalistic urges type of thing?
Yeah.
Like remedy it for a little while?
And it alluded to that it would kind of like eventually get rid of it. Okay. Like that was a cure. But
almost like wean you off of it?
I guess so. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't go into depth. I got a lot more in the internet about how to kill Wendigos, not really how to like rehabilitate them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too late. You just got to kill them.
Well, and it's hard when you run into one in the woods to try and pause it long enough to explain that
to make it a meal.
There's a better way.
Hold on, let me try this.
Try this instead. Don't eat me. So there's kind of when we talk about Wendigo psychosis, there's kind of the jury's still out a little bit.
Sure.
So there are some believe it's a complete fabrication, and it's used to justify obscene acts with the blanket of, we aren't, not everybody's part of this group of this subset of people, and so it's got to be unique to them, and it's a real thing. So there's a camp that believes that. And they have some good points, I think. So they point out that there are some psychosis-like conditions that can be explained by like severe vitamin deficiencies.
Oh, sure.
And in some cases, like the Windego can be essentially an elaboration of like some mental disorders that are associated with near starvation.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So, and I think, we're going to always try and find a way to find a scientific reason for everything. So that for sure is a valid point to talk about.
Sure.
So I want to talk about kind of two notable figures in the history of Wendigos.
Oh, yes. Let's do this.
Right?
I'm excited for this
So
part.
there's two. There's one named Swift Runner, and then one named...
It's a cool name.
Very cool. And then one named Jack Fiddler. So Swift Runner is kind of known as like the first Wendigo, or maybe the first notable, because it's around 1878.
Like a person with this Wendigo psychosis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
just the way he said that, I was like, he was the first Wendigo. I was like, wait, they caught one?
They got him.
They questioned him?
We got him. Wrap it up, folks.
It's over.
Okay,
so he was a guy that had the psychosis.
Notable with the psychosis, yeah.
The possession that they talk about.
Right.
Okay.
All right,
I'm with you.
The year is 1878. He's a Cree trapper. He's living in Alberta, and where they were geographically were about 25 miles away from a Hudson Bay Company post, so which would have had like emergency
all
food
the
supplies and stuff. But they were starving, he and his family. So it was him and his wife and 6 kids.
Oh, wow.
So they were starving to death, and his eldest son died. And then after his son died, I mean, it's brutal to say, so listen with care, but he goes on to butcher and eat his wife and his 5 kids.
Oh, wow.
5 remaining kids. So this is kind of one of those retroactive Wendigo psychosis and they claim it's the Wendigo psychosis and not because it's not, in the words of the article, pure cannibalism, but that he was so close to food and that he killed all the people there and ate all the people there. And so it was seen as Wendigo psychosis.
Okay.
Because of the intensity of that and like the lengths he went with the cannibalism, I guess. Ooh. So he later confessed and he was executed by Canadian authorities.
Rough.
Maybe not, actually. Not Canadian. Well, yeah, I guess it would have been Canadian authorities. Anyway, he's executed. So we kind of fast forward a little bit. Not terribly forward, actually, but there's a man named Jack Fiddler. So he's an Oji-Cree medicine man. So he's kind of widely known for his powers and abilities to defeat Wendigos.
Oh, cool.
So he claims to have killed 14 Wendigos, either Wendigos that were fully transformed or people on their way into becoming Wendigos.
Okay.
Right? And he did this either protect people or at the request of affected people.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Which kind of leans into that mental health part of it, like, because if they're, especially in the modern definition of Wendigo psychosis, which is the insatiable urge to eat human flesh, and then the fear of that.
Yeah.
Like I can see, you see them approaching this guy and like, I'm going to hurt people. You gotta stop me. You know what I mean? So he and his brother Joseph kind of carried out these things together, and they ended up being arrested in, I saw in some places it was 1905 and some places 1907. And they were arrested for homicide after killing a woman that they believed to be on the brink of becoming a Wendigo. Right?
Interesting. So
Canadian authorities arrested them. Jack Fiddler commits suicide, dies by suicide. And then his brother Joseph is sentenced to life in prison and then starts serving that term and then was granted a pardon, but then he died like 3 days before he would have been released in prison.
From what?
I think probably just the prison food, I would imagine.
It's terrible food.
Doesn't say, yeah. So it didn't say how long he was in prison either. It was really kind of vague about that. So it could have been a week and he died from something after a week, or it could have been, he might have been in there for like 25 years or something. So we're kind of up to today now. So I want to talk just a little bit about how Wendigos have affected pop culture and kind of how we view them now.
Yeah.
So, as as you can imagine, I mean, I've got this picture. I'm going to send this to you so we can include it in our post. But like this picture I've been showing the whole time we've been talking is terrifying.
It's quite terrifying.
I mean, and the descriptions of Wendigos kind of vary, but they'll often have antlers in some way, and be some weird combination of like man, beast. But that's what I've got showing up while we've been talking this whole time. It's got like really kind of crazy eyes and has these big antlers in the middle of the woods. Is truly terrifying. But it's not a big leap to think that they'd be popular for, literature or films or video games. Oh,
absolutely. No, it's a super cool. It's super cool imagery of this, horrifying creature that lives among us.
And I guess the difference is, though, that in pop culture and stuff, it's displayed as the creature, right? Okay. It's not so much. I think I get the sense from the article in Native American folklore that it is viewed kind of equal parts the creature, but equal parts with what the message is.
Just from what you've talked about, he seems a little more man-like.
Yeah.
Not so much. We haven't talked much about this creature yet, so that's kind of the sense that I'm getting from what we've talked about.
Well, I mean, there's like kind of the duality of it, right? Because we talked about it being this kind of creature that's hunting after you in the woods and preying on you, but then there's also the idea of what it is, like that you're leaning too far into, or rather too far away from moderation, and you're allowing this thing to overcome you in a sense, right?
Right.
So when we're talking about literature and films and stuff, like that's not the message that's sent over. It's not the message of moderation.
Oh,
and I suppose there's different like mechanisms that we get that story told to us most of the time. So it's just left like we're just talking about the monster. And to be fair, it is a super compelling monster and a very frightening story, right? Because you're out in the woods, man. Things are getting creepy and you're hearing human voices calling to you from out there. Gives me chills. So Wendigos have a few notable appearances, right? So Pet Sematary, the famous Stephen King novel.
Okay, yeah.
The magic that comes from the Pet Sematary and the evil behind it is a Wendigo.
Okay.
There's a video game called Until Dawn that I didn't research at all, but apparently has a prominent Wendigo presence. Supernatural, the TV show.
Okay, yeah.
The second episode ever is called Windego.
I think I've seen that one.
Yeah.
And I think that episode actually is what gave me some confusion between a Wendigo and Skinwalker.
Sure. I bet you and I watched that episode together.
I think we did, actually, yeah.
Back when you were just starting to dip your toe into spooky things.
That was, at the time, that was the scariest thing I'd ever seen.
I remember that. I thought then ago. And now that's laughable. The world is scarier than Supernatural.
We talked about some of the scariest experiences we've had. When I had to walk back the dark hallway to my room after watching that.
Oh, no.
Was terrifying. I turned on every light in the house. No.
I get that. Actually, I've stumbled on, I don't even know what the account is, and I don't want to talk about it more than we're going to talk about it right now, but there's some account on Instagram, probably a bunch of them, but there's one in particular where this guy makes like little short videos, like horror shorts.
Yes.
But he'll be like in his apartment building in what appears to be some big city, maybe New York, but like the one that I'm thinking of in particular, he like walks into the lobby, and then there's a flight of stairs that goes down into like a sub basement or whatever, but there's a sign over the door that says not a resident, and the door's open, and there's like this really gangly, creepy looking stringy haired dude staring at him.
Ugh.
Right. And so he like walks past him and goes up his stairs, and he goes up a couple flights of stairs and then looks back, and he can see that thing like 2 flights of stairs down looking at him, like it's come out of its little staircase and is following him.
No thanks.
But then like progresses, and so he'll get into his apartment and then looks down the hall, and you can see it down the hall, just peeking its head around the corner, closes the door, locks it, gets inside his house, and like there's a few dark rooms in his house. So he walks through and turns on lights, and then he turns around, and inside of his locked apartment, you can see like the edge of the thing's face, like just around the corner. You know what I mean?
No, thanks.
Yeah. So anyway, so I watched that, and I've watched a ton of scary stuff in my life. In fact, I love most of it, but I watched that and it got like a hold of me.
Yeah.
Like what you're talking about. Like, and so I'm turning the lights off in my house that night to go to bed, and like I keep like looking, and like we keep a light on overnight for our son,
right?
Because he's 3 and he's afraid of the dark, just like his dad is now. So, and we have kind of like a shotgun house, so it's kind of a longer house than it is wide. But So I'll be walking through and turn the lights off. And so there's a light on in the far end of the house for him. So I can see like shadows and stuff the whole way through. Yeah. Anyway, that's gotten a hold of me. And now that we've talked about it again, I'm going to have our time sleeping tonight.
Dude, it's getting a hold of me, and I haven't even seen it.
I'll send it to you, bro.
Oh,
we'll watch it together.
Oh, no.
Anyway, so Supernatural. So they have a Wendigo in Supernatural, and actually it reaffirms how to kill it, because we all know Supernatural is nothing if not a handbook for how to kill magical creatures.
They do their research.
They do some research, but they kill that Wendigo with a flare gun to the heart.
Oh, cool.
So
I don't remember that part.
So we learned from this that there's different levels of intensity and coolness with how you can kill a Wendigo.
Sure.
Because you just light the whole thing on fire, and that's maybe the wimpiest way. But if you're going to shoot a flare gun into its heart, I think
that's the coolest way. It's feed it animal fat or shoot a flare gun at its heart.
Yeah.
I'm going with the flare gun.
One of those is a clear choice. Yeah.
I think, and then dismemberment is somewhere in between those.
Yeah, I don't think it's anywhere in between those. That sounds like a horrifying ordeal, honestly. That sounds scarier to do than the Wendigo.
Oh, I thought we were talking about effectiveness.
Oh, I just meant like a cool story you'd want to tell your friends later.
Yeah, I found this thing. I started feeding it.
Animal grease.
And now it's my pet.
And now it's renting a room for me. Okay, there's one more kind of notable film appearance. So there's a movie in 2021 called Antlers.
Okay. Is that the one with Daniel Radcliffe?
No, he's not in it. But we may have watched this together. I mean, it's kind of sad, really. But it's this little kid who is living in his house, and like he must be like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And then starts going to school, and the people notice that his parents aren't with him anymore doing things, and it turns out that both of his parents are Wendigos living in his attic, and he's like feeding them animals and stuff to try and satiate them. But then people come to do wellness checks on the kid and then find the Wendigos, and they get loose and all kinds of stuff.
Cool.
Sorry, spoiler alert. Our rule in our movie podcast, Third Row Critics, is that we don't have to give spoiler alerts for anything older than Y2K. But this is for sure newer than Y2K.
It's only a 3-year-old movie.
Yeah, so sorry. It is a good movie, though. I liked it.
Yeah,
pretty spooky.
You spoiled it for me, but I think I still want to watch it.
Yeah, it's worth it. There's some good jump scares and stuff in there. It is, I will say this, it is really depressing. So,
oh man.
It is like, yeah, it's really depressing.
All right.
Anyway, so there's that kind of a newer Wendigo appearance. So kind of where we leave it today. So Wendigos now are largely seen as symbolic.
Sure.
Right? And I think that's kind of anything like this. Like, I'm not sure.
Even Bigfoot is largely symbolic.
He's very large, yeah. And he's a good symbol.
For not doing drugs in the woods.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, don't touch mushrooms in the woods. Despite every episode of Joe Rogan. So it's seen as a metaphor for like destructive consumption and unrestrained appetites, right? So it resonates with like modern fears of excess and environmental destruction and all of those things, right? But what I have to say is that whether or not it's a metaphor, if you're in the woods, carry fire with you. It's not a bad idea to buy a flare gun and put it in your backpack.
Why not?
Have a good, strong lighter.
For multiple reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, and don't be alone in the woods. It's just a dumb idea. Honestly, it's a dumb idea in general.
It's dumb to be alone anywhere.
And we've known a guy who tries to camp, 5 nights a year? He tries to camp solo.
Gosh, at least.
And he's talked about, he's a great camper, but he's talked about those experiences, and he goes camping all the time. I think, there's, depending on the year, I think he goes camping like, it wouldn't be uncommon to do like a third of the year is camping or something that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but he'll try and do 5 nights completely alone. And he says those are the scariest nights that he does the entire year. Because your mind can just wander.
No kidding. That's rough.
So that's prime time for Windego. That's all I'm saying. So avoid it. Don't give the Windego don't give it the cards. Don't give it the power. Stay in a nice place that has heat.
Yeah.
And as many flare guns as you can purchase.
Take a friend with you.
Yep.
Even if you don't like them that much, at least you can give them to the Windego.
Yeah, give them to the Windego.
And you can get away.
There's a t-shirt. Take a friend for the Windego. I don't think you'll be able to get away because it'll gobble up your friend super quick and then come after you because it'll still be
I
hungry.
feel like you'll have enough
And it
time
will
to
be bigger.
create some distance.
I'm not sure about that. Just buy a flare gun. It's a good idea.
All right, fair. All right.
Never a bad idea to have too many flare guns.
That's true.
Well, I paused because I was trying to think of a few more jokes about flare guns, but I think maybe that ship has run its course.
Joke's dried out.
So, speaking of things drying out, this episode's wrapped up. So that's all I've got on Windegos.
Wow. Okay, well, this helps clarify it a little bit more for me.
Yeah, so it's not skinwalkers, and they're really kind of distinct things. They're not really the same at all.
Nope.
But,
This helped.
yeah.
This helped. And now I know how to... Now I know how to kill it. I know how to get rid of a Wendigo, but I'm still not sure about if I run into a bear. So I guess I better Google that next.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think your likelihood of running into one versus the other is much higher.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
yeah, you should probably be more afraid of bears.
Actually, I have seen bears in real life. So I think I should look into that.
We should. Dang it! I'm gonna have to find the other episode. There's a podcast called National Park After Dark, and they did a crossover episode with. I'm going to find it and then talk about it in our next episode because I can't just talk about it and then not ever bring it up again. But they did a crossover episode with a different podcast that talks about like animal attacks and stuff.
I may have heard this.
So they talk about this whole thing about like all these grizzly bears attacks and brown bear attacks and all these things. And I think you and I I've shared this story with you before even.
I think so.
Just to help give practical advice at the end of this episode, just buy a can of bear spray and take it with you into the woods.
Yeah, it's good.
They're super cheap. It's like $20 to $40, and they're the most effective thing you can use against a bear. Just put a big fat cloud of that nasty bear spray between you and the bear. It'll leave you alone, and you can go about your day.
It's good advice for anyone.
Yep, it works on bears and toddlers, I think. So, genuinely speaking, it's a multi-purpose tool.
Perfect.
All right, man.
So check out our Instagram. You can find a link for bear spray.
Yeah, we will have to do that now.
Also, shoot us a DM if you got questions or comments about our podcast. You can find us at Low Grade Research Pod.
If you've got suggestions for the show, if you got topics that you'd like us to cover, if you, I think whenever I do this part every episode, I just talk about if they hate something that you do.
There's a lot to critique.
Well, maybe I'll turn the tables. If there's something that I do that really bothers you, shoot us an email, hello@otherbrothers.studio. And genuinely speaking, we'll take anything. So if you have critical feedback, please let us know. If there's something that we've been doing that really, really bothers or offends you, please let us know.
Gosh, even if you're a fan, we'll read a letter over the air.
Yeah, if you want to propose to your significant other and have us help you do that, we'll do that at least once.
Absolutely.
Once per listener.
Absolutely.
All right.
That's a guarantee.
That's a guarantee. All right, man. Catch you next week.
See ya.